Hello, welcome to another episode of the DRH Show. As usual, in each episode, I'll be talking to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Today, I'm joined by a counselor, Mig Bennett. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite.
It's great to have you here, Meg. Let's start off with you telling us your backstory, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Okay, well, I had absolutely nothing to do with counselling. I was in teaching. And when I had a child about 33 years ago, I had some postnatal depression following the birth. And that was really where it started, because I started a group to support other mothers in the area and realised I had no idea what I was doing. And I went on a basic counselling skills course. That just happened to be run by somebody who was an area coordinator for Relate. And at the end of the course, which lasted 7 or 8 weeks, he asked me what I was going to use the learning for. And I told him about the postnatal depression group. And he encouraged me to apply to become a Relate counsellor. So that really was not something I'd considered at all. But I thought about it and I decided that I would do that. My little boy had just started school. So I applied and was accepted by Relate to train for them. So that's where it started. And I worked for Relate and still work for Relate. And that's been about 28 years. And I've always kept my specialism in couple work and relationships. I haven't branched out into any other fields until recently, when I set up privately in private practice. I've always been interested in the sexual side of the couple relationship. And recently, the sex addiction, since the 80s, the sex addiction prevalence was recognised in America, and then more recently in England. And I had a colleague who was very involved in that, and she encouraged me to train in that field as well. So that was my more recent add-on, to work with either the addict, the partner of the addict, or the couple together. Actually, I don't like the word addict. I like to call it sexual compulsivity. But that's what got me to where I am now, which is mainly private practice, and all to do with relationships.
Mm-hmm. And Meg, as a counselor specializing in couples relationship, would you say that you have noticed an increase of relationship problem because of the pandemic? Because a lot of us actually have to spend more time with our partners, especially sharing space. Would you say that somehow the pandemic contributed to some marital problems or relationship problems?
Yeah, I do. I think absolutely. And I did a little bit of a survey myself when we went into lockdown at the beginning of at the end of April. Actually, my numbers dropped, and some of my clients who I was seeing face to face chose to take a break. But by the time we got through to sort of June, July, they were coming back, and I was getting far more new inquiries. July and August usually are quite quiet months because people are going away on holiday, and if they've got problems in their relationships, they often think, oh, well, let's wait till after the holidays. Let's wait till September. So July and August are quiet. But when I looked at this year compared with last year, in July, for example, I had 6 new inquiries last year and I had 13 this year. And that has continued to the point where I'm actually turning people away. I can't take any more at the moment, having to refer them on to other colleagues. So definitely there's been an increase in people coming forwards.
And without going much to the specifics, obviously we can't say that because of confidentiality. But could you just give us a heads up of what are the most common problems, and is this really tied in with COVID-19?
Yeah, well, I think the reasons that I'm getting that number of people is that the time together, the being thrown together with your partner 24 hours a day, has brought about two different types of client that have come forward. The time, for some of them, the time together has actually been quite positive, and it's given them time to reflect on their relationship, to have time together without the draws on their time of perhaps elderly parents or young children, any of those other things that they haven't had time. They're not always taking them here, there and everywhere. And that has actually given them the opportunity to talk and a realization that they want to improve their relationship and perhaps to look at, we've lost our way here a bit. So some are coming to me from that constructive platform, which has been brought about possibly by COVID. On the flip side of that coin, there are the ones where they're coming to me from a more destructive place. The time together has found them fighting a lot more. They've realized that perhaps this relationship is more destructive than they were able to spot when they weren't seeing that much of each other. A lot of relationships rely on time apart. They only survive because, in fact, one person said to me, I think somebody was made redundant, and her comment was, I think that this redundancy is going to really show, because I think if there hadn't been that time apart where I hardly saw him, our relationship would have been on the rocks years ago. So I think COVID has brought about those two types of considerations for couples. And the most common problems, well, again, I did a bit of a survey on this. The two most common problems in my caseload at the moment are the general poor communication, poor connection arguments. And that numbered about 7 out of 25. And the other big one, which even topped that at about 10, was sex addiction. So those are the two that I've found the most in my caseload recently. The others are things like problems with sex would probably come next down the list. Then couples where there is an element of autistic spectrum disorder, either with a child or with one of the couple. And interestingly, because normally it's incredibly high in my caseload, is affairs. They are almost my bread and butter work, and they are down to 2 out of my number. So that's quite interesting.
Now, I just want to touch upon what you said earlier, Meg, about holiday. Obviously, we would have a lot of restrictions with, holidays that we could actually book at the moment. But would you say that holiday has the potential to restore or kind of revive a failing marital relationship or any relationship?
It does, because it gives a couple a time to be together, to remember the sort of fun things that they can do together, to just concentrate on each other, and they can come back even from a weekend away feeling hugely rejuvenated and having refound each other and remembered what they like about each other. But there's a flip side to that too, because I often work with couples where one may be suggesting, look, this is going wrong. Let's go away. And there's a huge pressure on that weekend to get it right, to perhaps to have fantastic sex. And it can be a bit of a disaster. So I think it can work both ways. Whether that, and when couples do want to go away, I always look with them at their expectations and, what are you hoping for from this weekend away? And is that likely to happen? Is your relationship in a good enough place for you to be able to hope that this is going to be the be all and end all, that if you take her away, suddenly you'll have a fantastically sexual weekend, all the issues will drop by the wayside, and the relationship will be on the way to mending. And I find that often it is another situation where the couple come back and realize they've got major problems, and maybe this is in a worse state, their relationship's in a worse state than they had hoped. So pros and cons to that, really, Dennis.
And what would you say, aside from holiday, what else can they do? What would be your top advice in trying to, reconcile their relationship other than having a holiday?
Do you mean just particularly during COVID or just generally?
In general, I'm sorry.
In generally. Well, one of the big things we work on is actually finding time for each other. Often couples just have lost that couple bit of the relationship completely. It all revolves around work, children, the weekly routines, the shopping, and they've become just co-parents really, and they've lost the adult time. So actually programming into their week times to talk, times to go out, times that if they can and they've got the facility for childcare, to have some time a date night. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but the date night does work if both of them are focused on wanting the relationship to work. For some, that can be horribly uncomfortable if the relationship is struggling and they don't have much to say to each other. But generally, my thing is find time. And the other big thing is to look at your communication. And a lot of the work I do is based on how the couples speak to each other and listen to each other. Quite I get them to talk about something that's affecting them, and I help them with how they talk about that. For example, a lot of couples get into a very critical conversation where they're always telling the other one what they're not doing for them, or, you know, you never, you always, why don't you? And it's not until somebody holds up a mirror and reflects that back to them, a third party like me, that they can see that, and they realize that they could make a difference just by tweaking the way they start sentences. And we do a lot of practice on that.
Now,
so there's a bit of a teacher in me still in that element of the work.
Yeah, I could imagine, because you just emphasize how important the communication is, and of course, as an educator, I would imagine that you really have a good grasp of the value of communication. Now, I just want to understand, like, what about those couples? Because not all couples are living together, especially because of COVID-19. Some of them would have been kept apart because of the restrictions, and they just rely on technology. So how would they, could enhance their communication?
So the COVID couples that aren't living together, the ones that are separated, I think that's really hard for them, because at the moment there's an unknown about when they're going to be able to get back together again. And I think the one thing I think can happen in these situations is that there's an over-reliance on that one phone call, or that connection in the evening by the couple, becoming the be-all and end-all of the day. So I would suggest that they tried not to make that the only focus of their day. You know, life is more than just that half an hour or an hour connection with your partner, that they manage to find other ways to connect with different people, maybe people they share a flat with, or family members that they're living with, that they get out and just do the normal things. Because sometimes if you've had a tough day and you're relying on that one person to make everything okay at the end of the day, especially when they're at a distance and they've had a bad day too, then you can get a bit of a problem going between the couple. So I think keeping in touch is vital, but not putting too much emphasis on that being the only thing you've got in your life during the separated period.
And of course, Meg, needless to say that if couples are apart, there's more chance of them, one of the partners would be cheating. And you just mentioned earlier that you also deal with couples, some of whom are having affairs. So what advice would you give to someone who just found out that their partner has been having an affair?
Well, the first thing that I would find with them is that they're in crisis, and they would come in a huge level of shock and trauma. And my job in that first bit of the work is just to contain that crisis. So it would be to say to them that, assuming that they are not straight away packing their bags and out of the door, to take a deep breath and to take things one at a time. It's very easy to get swept away, especially if people around you are telling you to get out, leave him. It's very easy to jump into doing something. And my advice to them is take it slowly. Let's take a deep breath. Let's take a day at a time, and let's try and work this out. With hopefully, if they come to me as a couple, sometimes I just get the one who's perhaps been on the receiving end of the affair. And it's that really, Dennis. Don't make instant decisions. It's very, very, I think you automatically want to jump away and jump into something to get away from this feeling. But actually, you have to go through those feelings. There are loads of other things around that. Working with couples, the person who's been cheated on wants to go over and over and over what they've learnt, and they feel almost guilty for doing it. But I try to help them understand that what they're doing is trying to put all the pieces back into a jigsaw that they thought they knew. They had a family, a couple relationship, maybe with children, and they knew everything about their life. Their jigsaw was complete. Then there's the shock of the affair, and somebody's tipped the table over, and all those pieces have fallen down. Some of them have gone back into place, but there are now these huge holes. Was this happening when we christened the baby? Did this start before your mother died? There's all those sort of things go on, and they do need to be explored, ideally with the couple, so that the person who's trying to put the pieces back in can get some sense of what's happened to them. That is very difficult for the partner, the one who's had the affair, to understand. And that's one of the main bits of the work, really, is to deal with both parties and the different places that they're at after the revelation of the affair.
And what advice would you give to someone who has cheated?
The person who's cheated is way ahead of the person who's been cheated on. A, they've known what the jigsaw looks like. B, there's often a huge relief at having told their partner that now this is out. And they often find that they know exactly where they're focused now. They're focused on regaining the trust of their partner and reworking this relationship. So they've got a road to follow. The partner is way behind them. One of the things I say to the person who has had the affair is that it's the way they behave now, going forward, that's all that the partner can use as a measure to whether this relationship's going to work. So a cheating partner who has had an affair and then says, look, I've told you all about it. Don't keep asking me, why are you going back there? Just draw a line. Let's move on. That's disaster. That just isn't going to happen. And it certainly isn't going to get them to moving on in the right direction. When talking to that partner, and let's say it's the male, I say to him, I'm telling you that you are going to have to answer these questions over and over again, patiently, and giving as much care and attention to the needs of your partner if you want this relationship to survive. So I think my first bit of advice would be, keep answering the questions, answer them willingly, never say, ever say, come on, draw a line, move on, and be kind to your partner. They're going to need constant reassurance that you are now trustworthy. And there's another bit, there's another whole bit there on trust. The partner needs to act in every way as a trustworthy person, not just around affairs, but around everything he says and does, that she can trust that when he says he's going to be home at 8 o'clock, or he's going to leave his phone on the side, he's not going to take it to the bathroom with him, that he does the things that he's saying he will do. So it's a complex mix of things to work with.
And just out of curiosity, Meg, do you also deal with same-sex couples, or you just deal with different couples? Heterosexual couples.
Heterosexual. The majority of my work is with heterosexual couples, but I've worked with both male and female couples, all male and all female couples, and the issues are the same. They're about affairs, they're about sex addiction, they're about poor communication, and basically it feels like it's the same work. You just happen to be sitting with two men or two women. There are certain things that are different. For example, working with a lesbian couple with regard to sex, there are elements that are common to that relationship, that level of relationship, which things like lesbian deathbed sex, where sex can die off, and it has that sort of term. So there's a need to know a bit about the couple the different types of couple. But actually, I don't even think about it. It's just like working with any couple.
Mhm. Now, you just mentioned something about sex, and I understand sex addiction is another area of specialty that you work on. So, can you give us some of the indicators that someone is addicted to sex?
Yes, sexual addiction makes one think about somebody that just wants a lot of sex, really high sex drive, that sort of throwaway comment, oh my God, he's addicted to sex. But it isn't that at all. It's not really even about sex, as in penetrative sex and orgasm. It's about, as with all addictions, it's about a compulsive behavior around a compulsive set of behaviors which are around any form of sexual activity. So those activities could be watching pornography, but never actually having multiple affairs or seeing sex workers, but just being addicted to porn, visual porn. Some would never watch visual porn, but they would chat on sexual chat lines, but never meet people. Some would take either of those into the arena of meeting people for sex. It might be about having multiple one-night stands that aren't affairs, they are just sexual encounters with people that they meet either online or in pubs. Anything really that is sexually based, which has that level of compulsivity to it. So it's about how the addictive process affects the brain. It's about dopamine really, and it's about the boost that the dopamine gives to the person. And that dopamine is like an anesthetic. So generally people who are likely to be addicted will have had something happen to them in their backgrounds. They will either have had a trauma, they'll have had some sort of an attachment issue, or they'll just have had an opportunity. Perhaps older people who would never have had the opportunity to look at sex online, suddenly in later life there is that opportunity, and that's when the sexual compulsivity increases. So how can you tell you've got one of these issues? Well, it's really the first thing is, can you stop it? And if you keep trying to stop it and you can't, you've got a tick in that box. Is it affecting your life? Is it affecting your relationship because you actually aren't interested in sex with your wife or your partner? Is it affecting your family because you're staying late at work until all hours to keep up because you're up late at night online watching porn? Is it affecting your bank balance because you're paying to go to see sex workers regularly? Excuse me. Any of those, and there are, I'll talk about a website that people can go to in a minute, but there are those sort of surveys that you can do to look at your behavior and think, well, actually, this behavior that I'm realizing that I can't control, I can't stop, is verging into something that's really a compulsion that I'm out of control of. So if you have a worry about it, you need to stop and think and look at that. Can I stop? Have I really tried to stop and not been able to? How much is it affecting me? And do I really want to stop? I'm not the moral police. If somebody likes watching a bit of porn, they might like watching porn with their partner. They might choose occasionally when they're abroad to go to visit a sex worker. They are not addicted to it unless it ticks the boxes that I just explained.
I think the important thing to understand here, Mig, is that you said it. You're not really the moral police, but you're a counselor, and you're there to help them. That if your compulsion, and I think that's the key word, is really affecting other aspects of your life, then those are red flags. And
absolutely,
you really have to be mindful of that. Now, would you say that this sex addiction or watching a lot of porn, would you say that this has increased? Presumably, this would also have come out of the survey you've done. Would this also have increased during the COVID-19?
Well, looking at my cases, yes, it has. But bear in mind, I'm out there sort of advertising myself as working with sex addiction. But to have that number come through the door over the last few months, and I'm wondering why. I think again it's because people are stuck together, that they were able to hide those activities when they were perhaps doing them at work. They would perhaps be they would do it when the wife was out picking the children up. You know, the fact that we've been closely tied in together has made it less easy to keep secrets. And I think that's possibly why it has come to the fore, along with the things I said generally about time to reflect, time to sometimes. In fact, I have one client who came and she has decided to leave her partner. She's known about his compulsive watching of porn for quite a long while, and she's tried to talk to him about stopping and how she feels about it. But there's something about the being locked in with him and not able to get out of the house and do other things has made her realize that this is the time she wants to draw a line under it. So is it the pandemic? Well, I think that from my perspective it is, but I think there are people dealing with sex addiction and coming forward all the time. Just seems from my caseload to have increased during the pandemic. And maybe that's why affairs have decreased, because people aren't able to pursue the affairs. They don't have the time to go and have weekends away or be on work business. All of that has closed down. So the opportunities for the affairs to be discovered have perhaps been less. I'm only hypothesizing, Dennis, I don't know. Be interesting to see if in times to come there are surveys done on this, you know, on relationship surveys. Mine's just a little one across my 25 cases.
Yeah, but it's a very plausible hypothesis, because you know, internet is intimately intertwined with our lives. So, and
it is
very accessible, and the fact that you've got so much time, who's really stopping you from what you can access online? And of course, porn is very, you know, it's very appealing if you're really into it.
Yeah, and it's in our pockets. I mean, if you think about porn has been around since prehistoric man probably, but it was much harder to access. You had to go into a shop, buy a magazine, find your dad's magazine under the bed, you know, all of that. It wasn't something that people could get hold of as easily. And then we got into DVDs and it became a little bit more available, but now it's there. You can just have a quick 5 minutes watching something on the web if you need to between appointments. It's right there, and the opportunity to access it has made such a huge difference, I think, since the internet, in the last 20 years. And of course, it's made that much more available to the younger generation. So I'm seeing much younger, generally young men, much younger young men already really, I'm talking in their 20s, and they've started perhaps watching porn in their 10, 11, 12 upwards. And by their 20s, they've got a problem, and they begin to realize they've got a problem. Often the problem, Dennis, goes away when they meet somebody new, because a new relationship is a great feeling, isn't it? It's that dopamine rush, that dopamine surge of desire and being in love. And that actually can take over from the addiction. So sometimes people think, now I'm in a relationship, I don't need the porn anymore, or I don't need the sex workers anymore. I'm getting it from my relationship. This is what it's all about. It's going to be okay now. But gradually that high of the new relationship dwindles, and then they sort of just gradually, something will upset them. They'll be stressed. Maybe they have a row with their partner. Those are the sort of triggers that get you back to your soothing behavior, because addictions are soothing. We use them to soothe ourselves. We don't just do them for no reason. We do them because they take us out of life. And then they'll come back, and gradually they'll realize that they are back into the same pattern that they had before they were in this relationship or this marriage.
Now, Mig, this is really an interesting and specialized field within the counseling sector. But would you say that there is a particular individual or a particular book which has influenced your work or your approach to counseling?
Do you mean a client group?
I mean, like, is there a particular person, an individual who inform you of how you should do things, or let's say a book, or
Yeah. My friend and colleague Joy Rosendale, who trained in America with Patrick Carnes, who's the sort of godfather of the counselling for sex addiction. She inspired me the most, and it was she that encouraged me to take my interest further. She is very well known in her field, and her particular speciality is working with the partners. She set up the very first groups in the UK for partners. All the emphasis was on the person with the compulsive behaviour for quite a long time. So she's my great the person I've admired the most. I trained with Paula Hall, who's written books about the subject, and has a centre specialising in sex addiction and sexual compulsivity. So I have great admiration for her. So books, I would recommend Patrick Carnes' book Out of the Shadows, and Paula Hall's 3 books, Sex Addiction and Understanding and Treating Sex Addiction, Sex Addiction, the Partner's Perspective, and there's one, Sex Addiction, the Couple Perspective. And they are good basic information books for the clients and for counsellors. The other institution that I am a member of is called ATSAC. It's the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Addiction and Compulsivity. And that is a great resource. It gives you lists of books. It gives you lists of counsellors that have qualified in sex addiction therapy. So they are people who've not just done a one-day taster in it, but have actually done a diploma, and that they have accredited or have acknowledged as having the right qualification. That would be where I would start. You know, if somebody's looking at this and thinking, well, maybe this is me, I would go to that website atsac.org and have a look at what they say about it.
Okay, so Mig, you've just told us about who inspired you, or what book inspired you or informed your approach to counseling. Now, of course, over the years of you practicing your counseling profession, you've also come across a number of misconceptions. So can you kind of identify some of the misconceptions that you've come across and sort of address them?
I think one of the misconceptions is that if you are doing something that is harmful to you, like watching porn or drinking, that you can stop, that it's an easy choice to stop doing what you're doing. But understanding of what's happening in the brain around addiction, having an understanding of what addiction is and how the brain works. And one of the things I do with people is help them to understand what's happening in their brain when they get these urges to act out sexually. Another misconception is that everybody that does that is there's something sexually disgusting about it, that they may be paedophiles or they're in some sort of dark world. But my understanding, and the people that I've met in this area who are struggling with acting out sexually, are actually just the next guy in the street. They are the man next door, the guy driving the bus. They are not anybody that is sort of standing on a street corner or queuing up outside a massage parlour. They are ordinary people struggling with something, generally leading ordinary lives.
And of course, over the years, you've come across a number of people, and just like what you said, we can't really tell that, you know, there's only one particular person who gets addicted to sex or to pornography. Now, I just want to hear from you. What would be your advice? I know we touched on the importance of communication earlier, but do you have any advice on how we can build a more resilient relationship?
I think that's what's so devastating, is that people who are in what they would see as an ordinary life are suddenly, particularly if they're the partner, the world comes crashing down because life isn't normal anymore with what they've discovered. And can I talk a little bit about the partners?
Yeah, sure.
What I wanted to say is that when the world does come crashing down for a partner, one of the first things I look at with them is that they are not the cause of what happened. They can't control it and they can't cure it. That's down to their partner, to the person with the problem to deal with. But they feel that there must be something about them that has caused this to happen. And sexually, of course, that's a real shameful feeling for the partner who's just discovered that this is happening. So that's a really big thing. You didn't cause it. And nearly every single time where I've worked with a couple in this respect, the behavior has predated the relationship. This isn't something caused by the relationship. It's something that the partner, that the person who does the acting out has developed over time as a self-soother, as an anesthetic, nothing to do with the behavior of their wife or their partner.
And Mig, as a counselor, what's the important thing that you want the public to know about your work? Like, what's the big message?
Dennis, I'm often asked if once couples have struggled with something as devastating as discovering a sexual addiction or even an affair, is the relationship doomed to failure? And I think that's one of the things I feel that I can bring to a couple, is that there is a hope of an opportunity. And in fact, I really believe that out of some of these crises, a couple can get an incredibly different relationship going almost immediately. They often say to me, we have talked so much in the last week since this came out. We're seeing each other as real people suddenly. And it is a huge opportunity and an opportunity for something new beyond this. It isn't always the case. Obviously, couples separate and some partners just say, that's it, I'm going. But I do give the hope that this is an opportunity for something better and newer beyond this.
And Mig, how do you relax? What's your distressing outlet?
I play tennis. I play lots of tennis. That's my best stress buster. And I've got a new grandchild, and I'm in that adoring grandmother stage. So I make time to see him. So, but yeah, I get lots of fun on the tennis court. I run around and I get my brain into something completely different, beating somebody on the other side of the net. So yeah, that's how I de-stress.
And Mig, what do you think you would be doing if you didn't work as a counselor?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. I think I'm retired effectively, so I think I would be spending more time doing things that I like doing, like my tennis. I like reading. I love reading. I would like, if it wasn't COVID, to start to do a bit more traveling. But I don't know what I would do if I wasn't a counsellor. I certainly don't think I'd go back to being in teaching. I think I might open a cattery. I love cats.
Okay. I also love cats. And finally, Mig, what else is in the pipeline?
I think after COVID, as COVID has got worse, I have done too much work. So I think I need to pull back a little bit. I think in the pipeline is probably less work and more play.
Brilliant. Of course, Mig Bennett, it's been a wonderful time talking to you and getting to know about your area of expertise. Thank you for sharing your time here at the DRH show. I look forward to hearing more about your work.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, Dennis. I've enjoyed meeting you, and I hope people have enjoyed hearing it, or will enjoy hearing it. Take care.